This is March 28th, 1984. Joe Todd, an interview with Dale Finney. Okay. Sir, where were you born?
I was born in Amity, Arkansas,
And when's your birthday?
19th, June 16, 1918.
1918. Who's your father?
He was Henry Finney.
Henry Finney. And who's your mother?
It was Effie Finney.
What was her name before she was married?
She was a Spears.
Spears. What kind of work did your father do?
Well, he's deceased now.
No, what did he do?
He was a minister.
Minister.
Free Will Baptist minister.
And how long did you live in Arkansas?
Well, we left Arkansas when I was 2 years old.
And you came to...
McCurtain County, here at Idabel.
How come your father came to Idabel?
Really? I really don't know. I sure don't.
Yeah. Why don't you come over here?
Yeah, more.
Yeah. We'll get you on tape too. You say he had a sister here?
His wife had a sister living here, and they came and lived near them.
Yeah, that's true.
And where'd you start school?
At Cisco, out
Cisco.
west of Idabel. It's not in existence anymore.
1924, 25?
Somewhere along there,
Yeah.
just roughly.
Okay. As a boy, what kind of chores you do around the house?
Well, we lived on the farm, and about as far back as I can remember, I worked a team of mules and farm.
What, walking plow?
Yeah, yeah, all
How many acres would you plow in one day?
in one day.
Yeah.
Well, I left there when I was about 15, and our entire farm was 40 acres, and I had a brother and 4 sisters, and mother and father, and we all lived off that 40-acre farm.
What's the major crops you raised?
I'm a little bit hard.
What was the major crops that you raised?
Cotton and corn.
Cotton. How much cotton could you pick in a day?
I could only pick about 150 pounds, something like that.
When did you decide to go into the lumber business?
It was in 1936, and the Depression kind of forced me into it. You know, like I could get paid a salary there. You know, would you like to know how much that salary was?
Yeah.
24 cents an hour. That was Dierks. Well, right after Dierks Lumber and Coal Company came into existence.
You say you left the farm when you were 15,
That's when I was 16.
16. And did you start working the mills then?
Yeah, and incidentally, I had to lie about my age because they didn't hire anyone but 18. But in order to get a job, I told them I was 18 years old, and they gave me a job.
What was your first job?
I wrapped lumber finished lumber in the trim pack.
What does that entail? What were your duties?
Window trim and door trim. And we wrapped it in corrugated crates, you know, and sealed it up,
Okay.
keep it protected from dust.
How long did you do that?
I done some of this now, it's guesswork, probably done that 4 years. And then I moved to the sawmill.
Where was the first mill you worked in?
At Wright City.
At Wright City? Okay. Is that one big complex or what? At that
It
time?
was at that time, yes.
Yeah. Then you moved to the sawmill. What did you do there?
I scale the logs as they come in the mill.
How do you scale a log?
Well, you have a scale stick, that gives you the dimension and also the amount of footage in the log, and you put the scale stick across the end, and you give a bark and take a bark, they call it. In other words, the top side of the inside of the bark is the number you use, and per length, and it tells you on the length.
You do use the diameter plus the length of the
Right.
log?
Okay. And it's graduated though on the scale stick
And then
itself.
you get the number of board feet in that log?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Now, is that when the logs first hit the mill?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, they entered the mill.
So were logs ever floated to Wright City in the ponds?
Yeah. They were unloaded off the railroad track into the pond, and I don't remember any logs being trucked in there then. They all came from up around Cleveland on the train.
Was there a reason they had the pond there for the logs?
Yeah.
What was the reason?
The reason, for 2 or 3 different reasons, in the wintertime, they wouldn't freeze as bad dumped in this water. And then another reason, they had walkways built out over the pond, and they could bring them in one at a time, you know, and didn't have no hoist of any kind to lift them. They just floated them in there one at a time, and then they went in the mill.
Yeah, how did you get the log out of the water?
The chain came down in the water, and you just pulled. It had dogs on it, you see, and you just pulled the log up there, and these dogs got hold of it and took it on.
What kind of clamp?
No, their teeth
Okay.
sticking up from the bottom of the chain, and you just bump this log up here, and that thing would catch it.
It's kind of a conveyor there.
Yeah, conveyor. That's what.
Was the mill all steam driven at that time?
Yeah.
Okay. And so you're the first one to get the log. You scaled the log.
Yeah.
Then where'd the log go?
You had 2 decks and 2 carriages. If you kept both sides full. Now one side could take a longer log than the other, but then I had steam kickers that would kick that, and also I had a deck saw that would cut the log in 2. There was some, I don't remember whether those tree length logs came in, but they were long enough they had to be cut because we had a steam deck saw that came down and cut them. And then we'd kick them off to either side. The long one, of course, went to what we call the long side, and the shorter ones to the short side.
Okay. You ever ride a carriage?
No. I went to some, incidentally back then, that was required to learn to saw. You first started dogging and then block setting, and after block setting, then you could learn to saw. But I went from operating this deck saw to sawing. I bypassed all that.
The deck saw, is that a circular saw or a bandsaw?
Circular.
Circular saw. And that's where you cut the big logs in 2?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How long would a log have to be before you cut it in 2?
Well, most of them is 32 foot, and you see you could get 2 16s out of it, or
How come you went from a deck saw straight to a sawyer? How come you bypass the carriage?
the only reason I know of that, this steam deck saw had to be operated just about like a carriage. And the superintendent of the mill at that time was Ike Anderson. And he come by and said, if you can do that, you could run that carriage. And I said, do you care if I try it? He said, well, I have at it. So I just began, you know, the other sawyers had to get their permission to do it. But I just began moving that carriage up and down the track and went sawing from there.
Okay, now how exactly does a deck saw operate? Is it on a carriage?
No, it's on a steam cylinder itself. This steam cylinder, I would say, is probably 5 foot long and about 6 inches round. And of course, as you raise it up, the shaft come up out of it. And then to let it down, if you just pull you had a lever here. If you just pull it over here, boy, that thing would just go down like that, you see, but you had to kind of ease it down, and it touched the log, and then you cut on through it, and then if you just shoved it over to go up, it knocked the ceiling out, you see, so you had to, what we call choke it or check it just before it got to the top.
So it's a suspended saw blade then?
Yeah, right.
Okay. Now, what does the dogger and the block setter do on the carriage?
The dogger actually has the head dogger has one lever, and the knee of the carriage has teeth in it with a lever out here that as he pushes the lever down, these teeth come up from the bottom and the top and catch the log. Now the back dogger has two levers, and he's got about twice as hard a job. If you had a good back dogger, you had something to be proud of, because you could depend on him. When you went to turn the log, if he didn't hold it just right, he'd just go out the other end of the mill, so it was up to him to hold that log till you hit it with the nigger bar, and then it turned, and he had two levers and a hammer dog. So he dogged with both levers and sat down on one of them and throw this hammer dog over.
Okay. And what does the block setter do?
He gives you whatever you ask for on the lumber dimension, you know.
Okay.
If you ask him for, he'll automatically give you 1 inch, but if you wanted 5/4 or 6/4 or you know, various different 2 inch, and sometimes you'd get a 4 inch, but that'd be a special order. But
Now, is he moving the log or the saw blade? What?
no, he's just riding the carriage. That's all the block setter done, was rode the carriage, and he had this dial in front of it with the, and it's the pointer and a friction lever. Those run by friction. No rope deal went around and pulled the friction on the carriage. And now I never did set blocks. I don't know what dimensions he had, or size that he'd get on there, but he'd give you whatever you call for. I'm talking like sawyer.
I've heard someone call, it's either the carriage or on the carriage, a steam nigger.
You won't know what the steam nigger is?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's what you turn the log with. The sawyer uses it.
Okay.
It's a metal, I'd say it's a 6 inch by 4 inch. So there's 2 bars with rivets through it, and it's got 3 teeth in it. And they stand up something similar to that. But they're right in under where the log goes. When you go to turn it, this nigger is also about on the cylinder like that deck saw to come down. So as your log come back there, you come up with that, and this top tooth catches it, and you give it a stroke, something like that. In other words, that nigger minds exactly what your hand does. If you come straight back, it may be as far from here to that platform from it. But as you come back this way, it'll rear back. If you come over this way, it'll come straight up. If you go over that way, well, man, you could break a log. See that one sticking up there?
Yeah.
You could hit with that thing and break that log just like that. And but these teeth, see that it'd be down below the log, and as you come up with it, the tooth would catch right there and flip it. And you just hit it enough that it flipped, and then you'd hit it this way and hold it up again the knees, you know.
What stops the carriage?
Well, it's
We're going back and forth. What stops it?
from the terminology that we use, we plug it. In other words, you've got steam going in each end of this gun. And the steam on the front end here sends the carriage this way. And then you close this valve and open this one back here, and it brings the carriage back this way. Well, you come back wide open just as fast as it'll go. Well, to keep it from going on out the back end, as you get up here at a certain place, you push your lever all the way over and throw steam to the front. Well, that cushions it, you see. And
Ever have a carriage run out for?
no, I never did, but I've seen them. I've been lucky. I never did.
Is that the fault of the sawyer, or is it mechanical?
Well, most of the time it's mechanical.
It is?
Yeah, something will hang up or some debris get in the control some way, you know. No, I never did really know it was being the fault of the sawyer.
What's the most dangerous job in the sawmill?
You mean now or then? Then, I imagine that block setting or dogging, either one would be considered the most. I had a saw break. Am I talking kind of like you want me to? I mean, is this
Yeah,
all right?
that's fine, that's what we
Okay.
want.
One night we was sawing and it was frozen timber. You know, this pine is pretty bad to freeze. And I was going along just like I normally would. Of course, you've got to be extra cautious in that frozen timber. But this saw is a bandsaw. And it just turned into toward the center of the log and broke. And the block setter happened to be right in front of it. And it just wrapped all around him. This bandsaw did. He didn't get a scratch. We put on another saw and he got on and here we went again. Well, I just knew that it cut him all to pieces, but it didn't.
And also, you could pull a slab in here, or
Yeah.
tore his eye out one time with a slab.
Yeah, as you cut a slab off, it'd fall over on live rollers here. Well, sometimes the butt end would cause the other end to kick out, you know, and you carried it, caught it coming back, and caught me right in the eyebrow. Took 6 stitches. If it had got me right on back there, it would cut my head off, you know, as it come across. But I'd say the most dangerous job would be the block setting or the dogging.
How come you use a bandsaw on the carriage?
Well, they take less curve. You know what?
Yeah.
A big old circle saw takes out so much curve, and a log of much size, several runs through there, you cut up into dust, you know, as much but you'd save a lot of curve, in other words, with this bandsaw. And they're faster. You can just feed them faster
Yeah.
than you can.
How wide is the curve from the bandsaw? Or how wide is the saw? The
Now,
figure saw?
I might not tell you accurate on that, because Fowler would nearly have to tell you that. I really don't know.
That's the man that sharpens the saw?
Yeah.
Are they sharpened by hand or by machine?
No, not by machine.
By machine.
Yeah.
Is that the only bandsaw on the mill, on the carriage?
No, now this band mill is not on the carriage. The band mill is stationary and the carriage goes back and forth past the saw. But in the mill that I worked at Wright City and Broken Bow both, there's two band mills. One we call the left side and the other the right side. And they operate just alike. One at Broken Bow had what they call an 8-foot band mill. Big old Alabama mill that you could cut a log 6 foot in diameter easy. And then on the other side though, the short side was just a smaller 6-foot mill.
Yeah.
They cut all hardwood.
Yeah, the
They
Broken
cut
Bow.
all pine at Wright City.
Okay. What is the difference between cutting pines and hardwood?
Well, pine is just one species, see, and of course you cut for grade, but in hardwood, while you have all species of hardwood, and sometimes they'll timbers, you know, like cross ties and things, where in pine, it's always just lumber.
Can you judge what kind of lumber you're going to get out of a log from the bark of it? How do you do it?
Well, now the butt cut of your log is normally clear till you get into the heart. And nearly all of them or a lot of it, has got some knots right in the heart. But you get your good lumber off of the butt cut of a log, your clear lumber, like this.
Does the saw have to run faster to cut hardwoods?
No, it runs slower.
Go slower.
Yeah. The reason the sawdust comes out different, sawdust out of pine is a stringy thing, you know, but out of hardwood it's fine dust, and it chokes the teeth up so bad, you know, you have to run a little bit slower.
Okay. How many steps does a log go through from when it hits the water till it's finished lumber? How many steps?
To the finished lumber?
Till it goes, I guess, to the kiln.
Yeah, yeah, it'd go from the sawmill out to the sorter chain, they call it, where they sort out different sizes and width and length. And then it goes to the dry kiln in stacks. And from the dry kiln to the dry shed, they call it, to dry. And then from there to the planer mill. And it's dressed, you know, pattern stock, you know. They used to cut a lot of pattern stock, like center match and trim, drop siding, you know, and things like that. But anyhow, the planer, and then to the loading on the cart.
Is the kiln a dry heat, a wet heat?
It's steam heat.
It's
It
steam
was
heat.
at that time, and I'm pretty sure it still is.
How long does it take to dry lumber?
I better not answer that because I really don't know
Okay.
exactly. Now it varies. They're cutting some ash now, they tell me, over at oak and ash there at this KCS mill at Idabel, that they have to dry it 4 or 5 days, you know, a long time. It seemed like pine, now I'm just guessing, but it seemed like they dry it in about 72 hours, something like that.
When was the sign language developed?
It's before my day. I really don't know.
I don't know anything about sign. I don't even know what to ask about sign.
Yeah.
That's why we're going to do a video on it.
Would you like me to tell you, after I've loaded the log with the signs that I would give?
Yeah.
Okay, when you first load your log, now see the sawyer standing here with the saw lever in this hand, the nigger lever we'd call it in this hand. This lever works the carriage. As you push it forward this way, here this carriage will come right
So it's
down.
in your left hand.
Yeah, well now, there's a right and left.
Okay.
But I was mostly a left sawyer. I could saw on either side. If you get over here on this side, you're sawing with your right hand and using this for your nigger bar. And you have to really watch because you're used to it the other way and you'll get them mixed up. But anyhow, I was just telling her after John called me that call him back in mind, now, because that's been a long time ago. We'd load this log and the block setter could tell by the weight of the nigger bar whether he'd hit the saw down here, you know. And I could too. I could tell by looking, if my nigger bar was right straight up, he needed to set out a little bit more, because the first you want to do is get the bark, what we'd call just barely skim it and get the bark off. So if he wasn't out far enough, well, that's the first sign you'd give to set out. And boy, he'd set her on out there too. Yeah, like this. That means come out a little bit, you know. And then you'd start off and you'd maybe cut 2 or 3 lines off of the bark side of the log. And then you're ready to turn it. I'm assuming now that we've got a 12 or 14 inch log. And so I want to turn it over. Well, he needs to know what I want out of that. So if it's big enough to make a 12 and a half inch can, well, that's the sign I give you.
Little finger.
Yeah, yeah. So, and he knows on the block, the doggers both knows I'm going to turn it. So it's up to the back dogger to hold it till cause boy, that carriage is a moving. And so I come back there and I flip it with his nigger bar like I was talking about. And they dog it, and he sets where his run will come out to 12.5 inches. Maybe he'll take 2 or 3 lines off of that side, but he'll come out on 12.5 inches. Well, then he'll motion to me that he's on it to lay it down. That's the sign he does. So then I'll motion back to the doggers, I'm gonna lay it down. So we come back at the same place with the nigger bar, and I just barely hook the edge of it and it lays down. I'll slap it that way so it'll be up against the knees. And then we'll start off and say I've got some good clear lumber and they've got orders for 5/4. Well, as I get the bar, get a face on it, well, I'll do this way, that's 5/4. And if it's still good and clear and I'll want another one and another one. And then maybe we've got into some knotty stuff, you know. Okay, give me a 2 inch. Okay, now we're down into the heart of it. So we're gonna turn it over. So I call for 2 5/4 and then 1 inch. So they know we're gonna turn it again. The block setters, they have to raise up at the right time. So I go back there wide open and stop that thing and flip it and hit it with the nigger bar, and they dog it. And then that block setter will give me, as I get the face, I'll tell him when I want the 5/4. And he'll give me 2 5/4, then the rest of it will be on the 1 inch.
How long were you a sawyer?
Well, I started sawing when we get married, 39.
39.
I started sawing.
You started sawing that year.
Well, I started in 39 and left Wright City then in 47.
Except for the 2 years you was in the
Yeah.
Navy.
Uh-huh.
I guess 45 would be when you really start. Well, you
Well,
went
my
back
seniority actually went on through that time because I was in the Navy. And then I went to Broken Bow in 47 and saw the Hardwood till
You saw 19 years there, how much that would be. I don't know what
the
year
rest of
that would be.
19 years then would be
You
at
saw
Broken.
19 years there and they had posted somewhere down there, no, whatever.
What effect did World War II have on the lumber business?
Well, you could actually get deferred to stay in, stay with them.
Until it got too serious. Then
Well, I chose, though, you remember, to go look for another job down in Texas, but my seniority remained, and when I come back, well, they got me right straight to come back to Wright City where I was.
one reason why you chose though, you knew you was gonna have
Yeah,
to go
yeah,
somewhere,
right.
so we wanted to see a little bit of the world before.
Yeah,
So you were in the Navy for
yeah,
2 years?
for 2 years.
What'd you do in the Navy?
I just, ship fitter division, I never did make a rank, I wasn't that interested in.
Did you go overseas?
Yeah, I was in the occupational force in Japan.
Did you read any of the sea battles in the South Pacific?
No, the war ended while we was in the Aleutian Islands. We was headed over to, but the war ended while we was in the Aleutian Islands. And then I was just in the occupational force.
Okay. What did you do during the war?
I had 2 little ones, so I went out to California when he would dock and stay and be with him, the kids, and then when he would have to go out again, well, I would come back to Idabel and go back again.
And was there any, did Idabel have any work for the war effort, the city?
There was even a camp for, I guess it was a WWII. It was Army. Between Idabel and Paris, somewhere there was a WWII camp. A lot of young women went in that, but the oldest, a lot of them went to the Sawmill and just took over a man's job. Hardly
Yeah,
any women were at home unless they, like me, had 2 little ones and no way to do it.
So a lot of the jobs in the mill were taken by women.
Lots of them were.
Sure.
Some older women that never thought they would go and work all day at the sawmill went to work, made time.
So you came back in 47?
Came back to Wright City. We came back in in 46, and then we went to Wright City and stayed about a
Yeah,
year.
that's right.
And we had our home then in Idabel, because when he went to go in the Navy, we bought some place there close to where all my folks live. So we decided we'd go back to Idabel and he'd go to Broken Bow saw, and he sawed then the rest of the time at Broken Bow.
Okay. So you're Broken Bow and you went there in 47?
Yeah, right.
And you sawed there until they closed the mill?
Yeah, they quit cutting hardwood.
And when did they close the mill here?
I wish I knew that. That'd be interesting.
Yeah.
Did you meet Willis later today? He was
Yes, sir.
up here.
Right.
He could have give you all that,
Okay.
but I just can't remember exactly.
Yeah, I think he told me.
Uh-huh. Mhm.
Okay. And what'd you do after the mill closed?
Well, I went to work in a little power saw shop there at Idabel and worked there for a while, and then I went to Dierks Lumber Company, and they had a German gang saw, and I learned to file saws there for that.
What's a gang saw?
It's a bunch of saws about, I seem to me like it was 15 or 16 saws, and the lumber you want depends on how you space them. You see, if you want 2-inch lumber, you put it wide enough, and they jig up and down this way, and that log goes through it and comes out all lumber. See?
Oh, so you cut, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
And then he
But now I didn't run that carriage in it there. I just filed the saws, and I was also the mill foreman. He put me in charge of the operation, you know.
And then you went to sawing there for them. He'd rather.
Well, later on, when we put the carriage in, yeah.
What does the mill foreman do? What are the duties?
Well, he's just responsible for keeping the thing in operation. See, any mill, they don't want it to lose a minute's time if they can help it, and which, you know, is all right. And that was the foreman's job, to see that it didn't lose a bunch of time and get as much production as possible, you know.
Okay. How difficult is it to sharpen a saw?
Well, those particular ones was no problem. Now, we don't want to confuse that with bandsaw filing, because you got a lot of difference in your bandsaw or your big circle saw either. These little gang were only about 4 foot long, something like that, and you just had a few teeth along there to fix it. You didn't have to bother with benching it or keeping tension in it or anything like that. You just really used it up and then got some more. Incidentally, I done that for Quintus Herring. He was the mill foreman there, or the mill boss, you know.
Yeah.
He and Joe owned that mill at that time.
Okay, what does a mill boss do? What?
You mean, well, then I might have said boss. I meant the owner.
Oh, the owner.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Can you tell about sharpening a bandsaw?
I could, you know, to a certain degree. I never was good at it. The first thing you do is you put it on your grinding machine, and if the corners are wore off pretty bad on the teeth, you swedge it. That's done by, there's 2 different kinds. There's an air swedge and there's also a hand swedge. That spreads the kerf of the tooth. As you pull the swedge, it spreads that steel. And then you have a shaper that you go over it with that and pushes them all to the right side. After you get that done, you start your grinder, and it's automatic. You know, it comes up between each tooth, and you cut that down until each corners are good and sharp, and because the saw cuts by those corners. It don't cut all together by just the face of the tooth. It cuts by those corners. And once you get it good and sharp, and it's ready to go. Now, sometime if one's had some rough treatment, you have to bench it. By that, you have a big anvil with rollers on each end, and you lay that saw on this, and you put tension in it. you have a tension gauge that is this metal raised up just a little bit. You can see daylight under this tension, which means that you've got enough in it. But if there's dark spots under that, you have a tension roller with a little wheel on it that you roll and roll those dark spots, and it brings light under it, which means you've got even tension.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you need tension in the sandball, in the bandsaw?
Well, that actually, I think it serves several different purposes, but they won't stay on the wheel too well. See, you've got a bottom wheel and a top one, and those seem like they'll stay on the wheel as good if there's no tension in them, and then they don't cut. In other words, the teeth side you saw is real tight, and the back side is tight, and that makes the line cut straight, where if the teeth side was as long, they call it, as the center, why, them teeth, you saw it give it that as it went through the log.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Another question. How does the bandsaw miss the carriage? This carriage is moving back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
How do you cut the saw? I don't understand how the log is on the carriage without the bandsaw hitting the carriage.
Well, these knees that I referred to a while ago that the log lays up against, the block setter works them back. He can, as you load your log, you back up with them. And then if he's a little too far back, you can just go back and forth past the saw.
Yeah, I mean, is the log hanging over the carriage or what?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
What he's
Am I
meaning,
making it clear?
what he's meaning is how could that carriage go by that saw and not saw the
Oh.
carriage as well as the
Oh,
log?
well, say like your saw was right here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the edge of this carriage is the only space, about this close where it comes, and your saw is far enough over here. But then the knee slides out on this part here, and he can come on out to where he can get a 1-inch board or a 2-inch as he comes through there.
Shoots the log out, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay, so the log is actually over the carriage then.
Yeah.
Okay, I see
Yeah.
that. I kept wondering, I said that.
Yeah. Sounded like the carriage would go into the saw.
Yeah, right, that's,
No, the log pushes out.
okay, that's clear. Okay. Did you ever work for Weyerhaeuser?
No.
Okay. How come Dierks sold out?
I don't know. I really don't.
Did you ever do any work out in the woods? Out in the
No,
forest?
I never did.
Okay. Is there anything I haven't asked about that you think is important?
I thought of something a while ago, but it slipped my mind right now. No, I can't think of anything right now. Sure can't.
When did are the mills still run by steam?
Most of them are water now, the way I understand. Now, I never did run a water. Mm-hmm. And some hydraulic.
How do they run by water?
It's a pressure.
Pressure.
Now, I've never run one, like I said, but I think those mills at Wright City now are water pressure. I'm pretty sure they are.
When you first started to work in Wright City, it was still steam?
Oh, yeah.
How did they have the saw blades attached to the steam engine? To the boiler? How was the saw operated?
Well, the saw was operated by big electric motor. It wasn't operated by steam.
Okay.
Now, the real early ones, there was a big belt went into this steam engine. Had an engine room in there. And John Burwell used to have one down there that run that way. And this steam engine turned and it ran your saw, ran your edgers. Well, that one big old engine run the whole sawmill.
Okay, if the saw's run by electricity, what was run by steam then?
The carriage and the nibber.
Okay.
In fact, that's all that was run by steam that I can remember. Now, the dry kilns, they use steam in them.
How hot does it get in the sawmill?
In the mill itself, well, it's not any hotter really than it would be most any place other than most of the roof is just sheet iron and such as that. But we did have, in the saw cabin, we had air conditioning,
Are you in an enclosed?
Yeah.
Okay, you're enclosed then.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, now, the more modern ones, those early ones back then, you was just at the end of the log, like all this would be log here, and you'd be standing here where you could see the log. And to see the lumber as it fell off back there, you had to look around your saw and see the lumber.
They lost a few sawyers that way, don't they?
They did.
So they built it where they were more safe.
Yeah, this scaler is his responsibility to kick the log off. And if there's a little small log like that, on this conveyor, the end of it would kind of hang under the deck here. And if you kicked it with those steam kickers, this first one just swing that other end around and come right up the side of the saw cab, you know. They had big railroad iron there to keep one from hitting the saw, you know. Yeah, it was something.
Did they bring pulpwood in to the mill?
No. No. Did you ever see one of these steam carriage run? I'll tell you.
Thing that we haven't talked about, but
I might tell you an experience I had with Hardwood.
yeah.
Here at Broken Bow, we had a big black gum log, if you're acquainted with black gum. And the grain in those things are interlocked so, and the log was so big it wouldn't go under the guide on the bandsaw. The guide is what raises up. After you get your log squared, you're supposed to let that guide down because it's got wooden blocks rubbing against the saw, and it has the amount of lead in that the saw has, you know. Well, we had to take the guide down so as much of the log as possible could get under there. Well, it's cutting such a big slab off, so there was a lot of lumber in that slab, and I couldn't just let it fall off and go on. So I sawed down to, I would say, not over 3 inches from the end of the log. And I come back to the deck and hooked this nigger under it. And that grain was so tough in that thing till I could, with that nigger wire, I could lift that whole log and that not break off. I just had to bounce and hit it, and finally that grain broke loose. Well, then I'd catch that big slab on the deck and lay the log down and cut off another big old slab, and then it's small enough so that I can work it up, and then I'd pick up these slabs and work them out. That's one experience.
How big of a tree was it?
On that butt end, I believe that thing was over 6 foot in diameter. It was a big, maybe not over 6. Well, now I couldn't even see the block setter. He'd have to stand up and look over that thing, and of course I was down lower a little bit than him. Mm-hmm. But it might not have been over 5 foot. I really don't know. But it was a big, as biggest log I ever saw in my life.
Man, where are you from?
I was born in Texas and came to Idabel when I was 4, so we both became Okies pretty close at the same
What part of
time.
Texas you from?
Around Dangerfield and Mount Pleasant and around there.
How come your folks came to Oklahoma?
Just like his, my father's brother lived in Haywood, so he wanted him, you know, then timber here was really something. A lot of people could work in the timber, or they could work at the little mill that was around, and they could make ties and make money. There was just more work like that for them than there was where we came from.
Our father made quite a few cross ties. That was surplus money, you know, when you couldn't sell a bale of cotton, well, he could make cross ties.
In the winter, when you needed some cash money, that was all we needed to come by. That way, it was hard work.
Yeah. Did you ever make ties?
No, I never made it. Now, only sawmills I have. I
Yeah.
made a many one, but not with a broadaxe like they did.
They would go down just with their axes and hew them out.
Mhm.
Trying to look back.
These back doggers had quite a, if you, like I said to begin with, if you had a good back dogger, why, he'd help you get production. If you had a sorry dogger, why, you'd miss your log half the time, because as you turned it with this nigger bar, he helped just enough tension on those teeth to help it flip it, you see. If he just raised it up, well, you're liable to throw it straight up in the air, you see. But he knew just how to hold enough tension on it. And by the way, you turned them on the fly. You didn't go back there and start moves around with that thing. You give him your sign, then back there and flip that thing right back. You didn't miss a stroke. You know, just right back into the saw.
How fast that carriage moved?
I wish I had a way of knowing. I really don't know how fast it
Well, you had to have a good team in the carriage. then.
You sure did. And their shirt tails would stand out as this carriage. It moved that fast that those shirt tails would stand out. Boy, it moved. One time, I'll tell you this, it was a sawyer. My brother was scaling there, and he saw this happen. Back then, you talked to those guys, those three men. You could tell them a long story, all by sign, and they wouldn't hear a word you say, you'd do it all by sign. Anyhow, this head dog, though Sawyer didn't like him, so he stopped the carriage and with motion, I want to tell you something, you know, so he leaned over like that, and he hit him. The Sawyer hit him right there, just his heart, laid him out. He's a black man. They had to carry him out of the mill. And he got by with it. There wasn't nothing ever done. Back then, you know, it was kill a man, hire another, and kill a horse, buy another. So, and he did. He tried to kill that black man.
Just like,
And back then it's called niggers, you know.
Yeah,
You done your best to kill him.
Huh.
But I never was for that. I always got along real good with the crew that I worked with. I've had different block setters that was just real good, and I liked them, and they seemed to like me, and we got along real good.
but it finally got to where when he saw he did all of it, that the other three men used to do. He
Yeah.
did it all.
Yeah, the Sawyer now does all that. You knew that, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, he sets it on blocks and dogs. And it's done
That's
by-
all on this lever that you had.
Yeah, got little buttons there. that you-
When did they convert?
They first converted from the three-man operation to just one man rode the carriage, and he operated these dogs by air pedal with his feet. And then from that, they went to the Sawyer operated it himself. And I don't know exact year that happened, but I know I had to learn to set blocks then, but I was fortunate enough to, at that time, we were just cutting all 2-inch lumber. Good, you know, clear, knotty, all of it was just 2-inch lumber. And we had a dial on our carriage. It was, would the word be calibrated? It was, had
dial, you know, where if you could start on a certain number, well, you'd come out on the 2-inch backing board. You see, it would be all 2-inch. But back to start with, that guy had to know how much room to leave on his dial to accommodate these 2 5/4 that I called you for, and then the rest of it 1 inch. Or now, before you turned it, it didn't matter what he was on, because you're going to turn it. That last time you turned it is when he had to know what to come out with on his last board. You see.
Okay. Well, I think we have a good interview.
I've enjoyed it. It just really called back some old memories that really, I'll be honest with you, I hadn't thought of them in. I don't guess I'd thought of them in 10 years or maybe more.
I'm just trying to think of anything we've missed that on the, being a sawyer on the carriage, and the steps are from the palm to the scale to the saw
Mm-hmm.
to the kiln,
Mm-hmm.
the planer mill.
Mm-hmm. That's just about the steps that it would do.
How many men worked in the sawmill when you first started working there?
Oh, this would just be a guess, but I'd say there was 20, something like that, 15 or 20.
Did you know old man Dierks?
No, I didn't know him. I knew some of the Dierks. I believe it's one of them named Herman that would come through. I didn't know him personally.
Yeah.
I just worked, and of course, with everybody would give the sign the old man. That means the old man's here, you know. Well, whoever in the mill passed by, old man's here. Old man's here, you see.
Yeah.
And well, then you pass the word, you know, everybody.
They
you see,
straightened up.
yeah, the old man's here. And now there was a lot of those sawmill signs. Some of them wouldn't do to say here in front of my wife, you know. But that's one of them, the old man. And let's see, of course, all right, like this. Or just about any word you could think of, you could give a sign, and these guys would know what you were saying.
You said there's another guy that you work with on the mill that knows the signs?
Yeah. I called his wife, and he's in pretty bad health. He, in fact, she said he had a stroke, and his arm, he can't use it anymore, you know.
Then there was one at Wright City you met the other day, you said might remember some of those.
He was he went to sawing later, but he was my block setter that still lives in Wright City. His name was Kaiser, Johnny Kaiser.
Would he know the sign language?
Yeah, he know.
Because, well, you have anything?
I stayed away from the sawmill as far as I could.
Why?
She'd go down and visit once in a while, but she wanted to hold her ears.
Did you ever, you've gone in,
Yeah, there's
those
a lot
older
of
ones were, I never heard so much noise, and I don't, that part turned me off. I didn't go down unless I had to.
Mhm.
I guess they were hearing protection now, don't they?
They were
I'm sure
closed.
they
They
did,
even
yeah.
moved around back
Yeah,
then.
I wore them long toward the last. But the saw cabs now, a lot of times, are closed in. The one for Heron that I worked there had a closed-in cab with a little air conditioner in it, and it was just real nice.
Well, that's good.
Sure was helpful, because they'd get awful hot.
Well, I guess that's it.
Well,
I can't think of anything
I've
else.
enjoyed it. I
Thank
sure
you.
have.